Hey guys, welcome back to our channel. We finally got part 2 up. Today we're going to be talking about pornography, how it affected our marriage, and everything that we did to get restoration in our relationship. If you've already watched the first part of the video, then you kind of already know how toxic our marriage was prior to pornography being involved. And so today we're just going to talk all about that, how we dealt with it, and everything that we did in between to get help.
Pornography started at a very young age. I would say the root of pornography. I was around 7 years old and went over to a neighbor's house, and his dad had a magazine inside the bathroom drawer. And I remember him saying, "Hey, come check out my dad's magazine." And so that was initially where I kind of first seen pornography. Then later on, fast forward, after high school, I was introduced to masturbation, and someone told me about that. So I struggled with that after high school into college a little bit. And then after that, I was married a few years later. Then I fell into full-on pornography on Instagram, and that's where it all really began to go downhill very quickly. I'd never drank in my life, never had a beer, a sip of beer even, or drugs, but the devil knew my choice of sin was pornography or women. And so I had this thought, well, I'm going to go to a bar, right? It's the next worst bad thing I could do. And the devil knew I am not tempted by alcohol, but I showed up at this bar and it was actually a strip club. And so that was, again, another dive into a whole different dimension. And so it just gets darker and darker from there. You know, it can end up going to actually being with a woman physically outside. And so, you know, by God's grace, that was not the case, but it can be very quickly.
The first thing that I did when I found out about all of these things that Daniel was doing was I went to a pastor and his wife from our home church, and they basically said, "Come over." I went to their house and just told them everything. Towards the end of the night, Daniel eventually showed up, and then they had a long conversation with him. They had a long conversation with me, and then they basically asked us, after all of that, if we were willing to take the steps to move forward towards reconciling our relationship and restoring our marriage.
So for me, I just wanted to get away and not have to think about the whole situation, and really just run from dealing with the problem.
Yeah, and I remember you saying, like, I don't want to deal with this, like, I'm just going to move, I'm going to start over, and that's going to be it. And then Pastor Brad said something like, he said, you can do that, but your problem's not going to go away because you're going to take yourself with you. And the problem is not in your location, it's in your heart, and it's something that you need to deal with. And if you don't deal with that now, you're gonna have to deal with it, whether it's 5 years from now, 10 years from now,
3
20
years
years from now,
3 marriages later.
Exactly.
He said you will end up dealing with it.
Yeah,
It's just a matter of when you choose to
exactly.
Surrender and accept that you need help with this issue.
Yeah. So by the end of the night, we both chose to take the steps forward to reconcile and restore our marriage. Even though we were both willing and we both said that we were going to put in the work, I wasn't sure if he was going to be willing to continue to put in that work, because I was afraid that he would possibly start but that he wouldn't finish. And I was faced with a lot of uncertainty. I just didn't know if he would stay. I didn't know if he would stick it out. There was a lot of unknown, and I felt like my life was completely in the unknown. And the Lord just spoke to my heart that even if Daniel did leave, even if Daniel did walk away and move and do his own thing, even if he did reject me, that he is not my God, that God would provide for me, that God is my refuge, that God is my fortress, that he sees me, that he will provide for me, he will take care of me, that he will be with me and he will walk with me. And that my identity was not in Daniel, but that it was in God. All right, so now we're going to get into all the steps that we took to seek restoration and healing in our relationship, not just with pornography, but also with all of the toxic traits and habits that we had. And so the first step is humility, and we talked a little bit about that in my previous video, but humility is just getting to a place where you just kind of surrender and just say, all right, I'm done. I'm not going to resist trying to get help. With us, we resisted a long time and we were not humble, and neither one of us had humble attitudes. And so because we were so stubborn, we were just in God's way. And when you're at a broken place, it's the best place for you to be, even though it doesn't feel like it. It truly is, because that's where God can work the most. But when you're not willing to move out of God's way and say, all right, God, like, I'm going to try it your way, and you move out of his way, then he can work and he can do what only he can do. But if you're in the way and you're going to, try and fix your husband or try and fix your wife or your partner, then it's just a miserable process, because trying to control one another is only going to make them resist any more. It's just going to make them resist much more. So getting to a place of humility is definitely a first step. The second thing that I think is really important is willingness. There's a parable in the Bible that speaks of a leper, and he goes to Jesus and he says to him, Lord, if you are willing, you can heal me. And Jesus said, I am willing, be healed. And I think it's such a beautiful story because it shows the faith of that leper. For one, he called Jesus Lord. He acknowledged who he was. He acknowledged his power. And two, he had the faith of a child of faith that God could heal him. And so I think we all have that same situation. We are all placed in that same situation where God is already willing and he is already able. But the question is, are you willing? Do you want God to heal you? Do you want God to fix your marriage? Are you willing to allow God to fix your marriage? Are you willing to take the steps forward to restore your marriage? Even if it's not marriage, whatever, you fill in the blanks, but God is already willing and able. The question is, are you? Okay, so who do you talk to when this happens in your marriage or in your relationship? For me, like I said previously, I went to a pastor and his wife from our home church, which was hard for me because I never wanted anybody from our home church to be involved in any of our business because it was just too close to home. And having them involved with that ended up being one of the best things that could have ever happened to us, because it allowed for accountability. And again, it's our home church, so we would see them every single Sunday and they would ask us, how's it going? How are you doing? Apart from the weekly counseling sessions we would do with them. So it was really good for us to have them involved in our lives like that. And also, that's what the church is there for. It's for not just fellowship and learning and growing, but also for accountability. Counseling was so vital for us in our restoration process. If you guys already watched part 1, then you know that Daniel and I went to counseling for 3 years, but nothing changed because our attitude and our heart posture was more of, I'm sorry that I got caught, instead of, I'm sorry enough to change and turn from the hurtful direction that I'm going in. And that kind of attitude is rooted in pride. Prior to hitting the lowest place our marriage had ever hit and experiencing complete brokenness, Daniel and I tried everything. I tried to control him and make him fit into the mold of who I thought he should be, and he struggled with pride. And I later realized that the root issue of me always wanting to be in control was also pride. And that was the very thing standing in the way of real change in our marriage. It made us realize that everything we had been trying up until that point hadn't been working. It humbled us enough to realize two things. We were incapable of fixing our marriage and changing each other. Our pride in thinking we could change a person's heart was the very thing keeping God from changing our own. Somebody on Instagram asked, "I'm afraid my husband will go back to porn after 7 months. How do you trust and not go through the phone?" I think when your trust has been broken, it's really hard not to do that. But what really helped me was knowing that we had a plan. Our counselors were actually the ones that helped us create a plan to move forward towards restoration. It made me feel a lot more hopeful to know that Daniel wasn't just saying he was going to change, but that he was going to take action and set up boundaries and have accountability to help him move forward. Because I think what we fear the most is our partner going backwards and us getting hurt again.
Also with accountability is having, there's an app called Covenant Eyes that you download on your phone. It sends a daily report to your wife, to your counselor, to your pastor, to someone you love or respect, whoever that is, etc., like we've talked about, to hold you accountable, to make sure you are taking steps forward rather than taking steps backwards and going to go down a darker path. You're going into the light and bringing those things to the light so that freedom can come. So accountability, having someone that you check in with daily, moment by moment if you need it, as well as getting rid of the things that are in your life that are causing you to stumble or causing you to mess up and fall. And so social media, being that's where I fell into pornography, I had to completely delete that app. For me, a lot of my identity was wrapped in that, but the accountability of saying, nope, you got to get rid of it, was a big thing. And, the kind of social platform or whatever you want to call it of thousands of people being there, and Nubia's like, no, it's got to go. And so I fought with that for a while, but again, the accountability of her saying, hey, this is not more important than our marriage. Our counselor saying this isn't more important than our marriage. Just had to get rid of that. And to give you some hope, it was about 1 year and 2 months before I had Instagram again. But once God set me free from this, I was able to go back and now, obviously guard myself and stay away from those sites, have the accountability still, but a light at the end of the tunnel. It's not like you're just done for the rest of your life, right, and you can never use that platform again. Yeah. Because some of us enjoy those things. We enjoy having the memories and posting and sharing with friends and family.
Finding your people and having community around you is so important, especially when life gets hard. One of the reasons is because whenever you're going through a really hard time in your life and you're just really struggling, whether it has to do with your marriage or anything else, it's so easy to isolate yourself. And when you isolate yourself, you spend so much time overthinking and your mind can easily go to this dark place. And overall, it can be really lonely, but being around other people kept my head above the water. And it also reminded me that no one really has it all figured out, that we're all in need of God's grace every single day. One of the most helpful things our counselors said to me early on was to be very selective with who I share everything with, because when you go through something like this in your relationship, you're in a very vulnerable, emotional place. The friends that I talked to were very few, but spiritually, we were all equally yoked. A lot of times, instead of turning to friends, many turned to alcohol, to numb the pain, to cope, to not feel the reality. But that's all it does. It cuts off your emotions, but it never shows you how to deal with them. And neither will jumping into another relationship, as tempting as it might be to find somebody else to validate you and make you feel less alone. The truth is that unless you find that in a relationship with Jesus, you'll always be searching. C.S. Lewis once said, God allows us to feel the frailty of human love, so we can appreciate the strength of His. I think His love is the love we're all longing for. We just keep searching in the wrong places. Another really important thing is boundaries. You need to have healthy boundaries. So for us, what we ended up doing was, again, like no social media was one of them. I actually ended up getting off of social media too. I just wanted to unplug because I had a lot going on, and I wanted my main focus just to be on God and just on our relationship and fixing that. And I didn't want any other distractions or anything else to mess with my mind. So I just wanted to get off of that. So it was really helpful, actually.
So another one that's super important for men and women.
The audio got messed up here, but what Daniel was trying to say is that whether you're male or female and you're struggling with pornography, a good boundary to have is to go to bed when your spouse goes to bed. So basically, no staying up late watching TV by yourself or on your phone. Creating healthy boundaries was challenging for us because we were used to treating each other so bad for so long. But I think what really helped us was, just like Daniel said, the accountability that we had within our counselors and also the willingness to change. Another healthy boundary was not bringing up divorce. Anytime he would make me upset, I would just say, I want a divorce. Like, that was like my go-to. And, that was one thing that our counselors told us is, you need to stop doing that. That needs to stop coming out of your mouth. Like, you're not allowed to say that anymore. And so it's something that I had to train myself to stop doing.
It's the D word. It's not allowed.
Yeah. Forgiveness is a big one. Without it, it's hard to move forward in life or in any relationship because resentment and bitterness will imprison you and make you carry the burden of its chains. For me, it took time. It was a long process, and I think that process will look different for everyone. In the back of my mind, I knew what the right thing to do was. I knew how much God had forgiven me of, and I knew that He asked me to forgive just as He's forgiven me time after time. And although I wasn't able to forgive wholeheartedly at first, I was willing to walk down the path that would eventually get me there. It took a lot of guidance from our counselors, a lot of reminders that I needed to hear, like not living in the past after choosing to move forward, and not allowing myself to be guided by the filter of my emotions, but what I know is true. I believe that God is good, that there is no evil in Him, that His intentions and motives are always good, pure, and true. So when He says to do something, I believe it's because it's the best thing for us, even if we can't see it at the moment. Forgiveness allows healing to come. It sets you free, and it allows you to move forward. Forgiveness isn't excusing someone's actions, or allowing them to repeat them again, or ignoring the fact that there are consequences to poor choices. Another question that was asked on Instagram was, what do you do when you have a spouse that doesn't want to change? My counselor said to me that it's a hard calling. Aside from infidelity or abuse, she said that your calling at that point is to be faithful and innocent in the eyes of the Lord in how you live towards your spouse. The other person's unwillingness to change doesn't permit the faithful spouse to be unfaithful to God's word, specifically in what He asks of us in marriage. But our hope as believers is that God sees our suffering, that He'll be with you in it, and will strengthen you through it. But also that in your faithful love of God and faithfulness to continue to love your spouse, it may draw their hardened heart towards the Lord. And just like we've said before in this video, you're going to want to surround yourself with a supportive community. It's an absolute must when you're going through something like this. As well as relying on the leadership of your church to be involved in your life, your children's lives, and your spouse's life. And lastly, she said that it would be appropriate for the faithful spouse to continue to graciously make their requests known, particularly for change in the other spouse. As hard and as hopeless as it felt going through that season of brokenness, I'll always be grateful that God loved me enough to allow me to experience that hard season. God didn't cause it, our own choices did. But just as a father would, He loved us enough to allow us to learn from the consequences of our own mistakes. I've realized that there are lessons that God may teach us in the valleys that we might never learn on the mountaintops. Yes, the valleys were really hard, but without them I would have never learned how to let go of control. I wouldn't have ever known what it means to really trust God, and I would have missed seeing God show up in His way. I think about the story of Joseph. He suffered through a lot in his life. His brothers hated him. They sold him into slavery when he was just 17. He was wrongfully accused and wrongfully imprisoned. And he could have lived his whole life embittered and angry. But he didn't. He responded to his sufferings with faith. Joseph saw that in spite of all he had suffered, God had never left him. Even though his brothers wanted to cause him harm, God's providence made it so that it would turn out to be good for Joseph and his family in the end. Their motives didn't matter to God, because He still brought good out of it. There's so many things we can learn from Joseph's story. But what stands out to me is what God can do when you move from a place of faith. It might not always mean that things are going to work out the way that you thought they would, but that no matter what your circumstances are, if you would just let Him have full control, God can allow good things to come, not just from the best moments of our lives, but also from the broken ones.